Okay. Everybody ready?
I think so. Yeah, let's get going.
Great.
Yay.
Welcome everyone to the Resume Building Workshop with Kristina Galligan. Kristina is the Director of Alumni Career Development at Quinnipiac University in Hamden, Connecticut. She oversees the strategic direction of the Alumni Career Development Initiative, which includes the design and implementation of programming and resources, such as virtual and regional events, career coaching, and educational content for adults at various stages of their professional lifespans. She's a certified resume writer by the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches, in addition to helping hundreds of candidates own and share their career stories through resume writing. She has worked extensively as a university liaison between hiring managers and job seekers. With a solid understanding of what employers want, her efforts empower job seekers to realize job satisfaction and career success while helping organizations identify top talent. Take it away, Kristina.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you to the AIGA for having me. This is my second event, actually, I'll be doing with this group, and I am so happy to be invited back talking about resumes. So whether you're a seasoned professional or a new professional or a recent grad, keeping up with your resume is always a really good idea, especially in a time of when the job market can be a little bit challenging or unstable or uncertain. So if we could, before I get started with my presentation, just by show of hands, I want to see kind of who we have in the room today. So raise your hand if you are still in school. Right. And how about if you are a recent grad? Let's say you are you graduated less than 5 years ago. Okay. All right. So a number of you in the room. And then how about you graduated, for those of you who have cameras on, more than 5 years ago?
Me too.
Okay. All right. All right, so it seems like most of the group is less than 5 years, with some that have a little bit more experience. So thank you for that. That gives me a good idea. And also throughout the presentation, I will be asking some questions, some opportunities for feedback. You can go ahead and put your responses into the chat. Nancy or another member of her team will read them to me so we can get some good conversation going. All right. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen. And if you could just enable me to share my screen, I will get that going. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Let's do it. So let's talk about resumes that pop. So first we are going to look at our agenda. So I'm going to do a little introduction to writing a great resume. Then we're going to talk about 4 things you have to do before you even start to write. Then we'll get into preparing your document and that style, that structure, and that's formatting, making a nice clean document. And then my favorite part, we're going to dive really deep into the content. So how to write your resume for maximum reader impact. And then we'll be breaking into groups for an activity. All right. And then I know that our AIGA team has a really great happy hour planned for after that, and we'll be doing some one-on-one resume reviews. So who can tell me, you can put it in the chat, what the #1 purpose of a resume is? Whatever comes to your mind. Sell yourself, qualifications. Yep, those are right. So in essence, you are selling yourself for the interview. Okay, the #1 reason to write a resume is not to get you the job, it's to get you that interview, right? And you actually have just 6 seconds to make an impression. There was a study done by the Ladders a couple years ago that said that the average amount of time that a recruiter spends looking at a resume is 6 seconds. That is a really, really short amount of time. So like all candidates applying for jobs, you need to really clearly demonstrate in these 6 seconds that your qualifications will help the organization succeed. So if you are, let's say, a graphic designer, your designs ultimately need to drive revenue or profit gains. But as a creative professional, you have actually the added challenge of showcasing your design skills that may be required for the role that you're applying to. So what is then a resume that pops? Well, a resume that pops is a resume that gets you that interview, all right? It's well written, it's thoughtfully designed so that it not only gets through recruiter software that scans the content of resumes for their relevance to a particular job, but its visual appeal is going to capture the interest of human readers, and then it's going to inspire them to spend just maybe a few seconds more learning about you. So if that's making you stressed, don't worry. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. You know, everything is designed to make the process of creating a resume a little bit easier. So as I mentioned, we're going to cover the prep work, the style, the formatting, and then really dive into that content. All right. Okay, so the 4 things you must do before you write. So first, the first 3 are actually going to help you develop your general, I would say, resume template. This is the resume that you're going to start with for most roles that you apply to. And then that last item on the list, analyzing the posting, is what you're going to do each time that you apply for a role. So it'll help you tailor and tweak your resume so the hiring professional can see just how great a fit you are for the particular role at your company. So first, you're going to identify your target role. So before you even think about writing your resume, you really want to identify this. A good resume is a targeted resume, and it's going to clearly demonstrate what you're applying for and why you're qualified. And I mention this because I meet a lot of times with clients who aren't sure what they want to apply to. They want to apply around and they say, you know, I just kind of want to see what sticks given my current skill set. And it seems like it's less work in the beginning because you're not spending all this time tailoring, but actually it's going to cause you a lot of pain and frustration in the end because your resume isn't going to be tailored to anything specific and you may not receive responses to your resume. So let's say that you are, you know, we had a lot of newer professionals here with less than 5 years experience. So maybe you don't know exactly what job titles you're looking for. Put keywords into an Indeed search engine, you know, put your skills in there, put competencies in there and see what job titles pop up. So really get that down to say 1 to 3 roles that you're really interested in. Great. Next, you want to develop a really clear understanding of the role. And there's a couple interesting ways to do that. So the first is to utilize online resources and databases. So there are several online databases that can help support job seekers or those just looking for information about the labor market. One that I use all the time as a career director is ONET, O-N-E-T, online.org. It's sponsored by the US Department of Labor, and it keeps information, up-to-date information on basically like all the job titles that exist and how common they are in the job market. And it will list common job duties, responsibilities, knowledge, skills that are required, education that's needed. So this is a great place to just see what's out there for an industry or profession that you're interested in. You also can check different associations that may be related to design or creative professionals. Those are a great place. You can check their job boards. You can find out, you know, who is writing articles for these associations, what's posted, and that's going to give you a better idea of the job market and the job titles out there. So the next thing that you're going to do is search and collect job postings. So I recommend that you go on various job sites. So you can go on, you know, the LinkedIn job board, you can go on Indeed. If there's any creative or design specific ones, you can go there and type in your desired role. I recommend that you don't limit it to a city or geographic area. Just search the whole United States and have a goal of collecting like 10 to 15 positions, right? And so once you've gathered like 10 to 15 positions that are in your desired area, you want to glance through and you want to see, okay, what are the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the requirements for this role, right? And you're going to note which ones seem to be consistent across the positions. So let's say 8 out of the 10 positions require a certain software. You should say, all right, you know what? I'm getting an understanding that for this role, that software is really important. That's probably going to make it to my general resume template, right? So it's a really good idea. What's in these, you know, what's consistent across these roles is going to give you a good idea of what should be in your template. Right? Now, the last place and probably the most fun and interesting way to collect information is to talk to people, okay? I recommend you talk to those who are already in the role that you desire, or those that interact with this role, right? So develop a list of questions that you can ask in, say, a 15-minute period of time. This is called an informational interview. A lot of you may remember this if you took like a career development class in college. Start within your organization if you're already working. You know, who might you ask for a quick coffee conversation, right? Then after that, you know, branch out. What are your affinities? You know, are there clubs that you're involved with or associations that have people that are with roles that you're interested in, right? Think about your alma mater, right? You may not have met someone, but there could be a whole host of alumni that are in roles that you're interested in. People are really, really flattered when you reach out to them. And again, you're not asking for a job. You're just saying, hey, you know what? Going through a job search and I'm really trying to figure out, you know, what this job is like in today's economy. What you do seems really interesting. Can I ask you a couple questions about, you know, what you're working on and the daily challenges of the role, right? And then when you talk to them, you say, hey, you know, what are your day-to-day duties? What's important to this role? Who do you interact with? Are there any trends that are affecting this industry or this role? Is there anything I should know about that should absolutely be in my resume that if you were hiring, you would look for? Are there some things that are, you know, that should absolutely are a no-no for this industry, right? So talking to people, you're going to inform your conversation from that research that you did before. But talking to someone is going to give you the real scoop on, hey, this is what this job is like, and this is what's important. Just going to check the chat.
We're fine.
Perfect. All right. So then the next part is defining your unique value proposition. Another way to say this is really understanding and knowing your brand, right? So if you're going to create a resume, you want to know first, you know, what makes you different from other candidates? What uniquely are you going to bring to this role? What are your major accomplishments and what are your standout strengths? Now, if that gives you a little bit of anxiety, don't worry. You know, these are questions that you can ask yourself. There are a lot of free self-assessments online that you can take. Some are fun, some are a little bit more serious. The Myers-Briggs type indicator is one, Strengths Finder is another, and then there's a lot of free ones that you can just find by Googling them. These will help you understand what are your strengths and what really makes you stand out amongst other candidates. Another thing to do is ask. If you have ever heard in sort of the corporate world, we call it a 360. It's asking those around you, like a 360, hey, you know, what do you think is my standout strength? You know, what is the first thing that you notice about me work-wise? Write down their feedback. These are all indicators of your brand and what you uniquely bring to the table. All right, so those first three, as I mentioned, are really about developing that general template. But what you also want to have is, you know, you want to make sure that you are tweaking your resume for a very particular job, right? So you want to say, all right, so what industry is this company in? Is it in, you know, a creative industry, or is it something that's a little bit more formal, like say a design role for, you know, a financial company or a more traditional marketing company, right? What particular problem is this company, you know, why does the company exist? or the job trying to solve. Like really, why is this job posted? Why is this needed? Right? What are the job requirements? We call them KSAs, so knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? What keywords are they using, right? And who is the target audience? So who is posting, who is posting this position? Who's going to read this resume, right? Is it going to be someone in the department? Is it someone in the larger company or division? So you really want to take that job description and really mark it up, circle it, truly understand the position, because the more you do, the more you're going to be able to tweak your resume to show that you're uniquely qualified. All right. So this is a good time for pause. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. All right. So once you've done those 4 things, those 4 steps, you're ready to prepare your document, right? And that means choosing the style, the format, and the structure of your resume. So let's take a look at some resume styles. All right. So 2 popular styles would be called a stylized creative resume, or what I call a modern traditional resume. And what you choose is really determined by the research that you've done in the previous section, right? Like what the company's about, what industry is this in, right? Stylized resumes, which those in the design profession may see frequently, those are characterized by, by color, by graphics, visual elements, right? They make a different use of space. A lot of times they have columns, they have boxes, they may have some more dividers. A modern traditional resume is used in a lot of different industries today, like in the corporate world. They usually don't use colors. They use more traditional serif fonts, and you're not going to see a lot of columns in them. They tend to be sort of just follow sort of a reverse chronological order. It doesn't mean that they have to be boring. This is just a pretty like standard clean one, but a lot of employers may expect something like this when you're submitting a resume to an online portal. So I want to ask you, we have a lot of design professionals on the call. Which resume do you have? Do you have more of a traditional resume? Do you have a more stylized resume? Or maybe you have a hybrid?
Rachel Conti said, fancy, fancy.
Yes.
Tracy said, does the recruiting software read stylized resumes?
That's a fantastic question. And a lot of applicant tracking systems can't read a stylized resume well. A stylized resume may show up a little bit skewed when it comes through on the other side. Someone here said always have both. And really that was what I was going to suggest as well. If you're applying to a design role, they're going to want to see your design skills, but I would always be prepared with both. And if you have to upload something to a more traditional ATS or online system, a lot of times they may even ask for a text file, like a .txt. And so you want to be able to even in that situation, copy the text, paste it into their box, and be able to fire it off. So really, I recommend having both just to cover your basis. Melissa says, mine is traditional, but super cleanly formatted. I let my portfolio be creative for me. Excellent. So there's a lot of different ways to handle it. The point today here is to show some different options so that you can be prepared. And it does matter what format it's exported in. Different systems or portals will ask for different formats. PDF is thought to be pretty safe, but I've seen a lot ask for Word formats as well. So it's important to save them in different versions and make sure that they're compatible in different formats. So those are some great questions. Okay, so these are just to show some different examples. You can see this one is a more traditional one, but it is making use of some boxes and some shading. There is some visual distinction, even though it doesn't use any bright colors. There's a lot of white space. And the resume is, organized well so that the expertise and the summary are on top. Okay. This one here for Emma still clearly shows the person's, job target and qualifications, but it's designed with a little bit more style and columns. And another two examples as well. You know, here's one for an art director that's in the more traditional style. A lot of content there. They divided their sections, the summary, the art leadership skills, the awards are up top. So they really crafted, you know, a top third of what the candidate thought was important to the role. On the same note, Pam Beasley did that as well. You can see this top third of her resume. Her name, creative and strategic marketing specialist, that's what pops out to me. And then the next two things I look at are her profile and her skills, because those were strategically placed on top with a lot of white space around them. So I would say that, you know, both of these can be effective depending on, you know, what the company and the job that they're applying to is looking for.
And should these stay to one page?
That is a great question. For someone who is a new grad, you just graduated with your undergraduate degree, I would say absolutely stick to one page. Once you have a couple years of work experience, it becomes less important to stick to one page because you're adding skills, you're adding accomplishments. I would say if your resume goes on to 2 pages, you want to make sure that the most important stuff is on the first page because the second page might not get read. Also, if you're doing a stylized resume, I find that it's easier for those to stay to one page because, again, they're making a different and sometimes better use of space. You know, by using columns, boxes, moving things around, different margins, you're often able to stick to one page. Whereas I see very often a 1.5 page resume for a more modern traditional resume. So there's a lot of different camps of thought on that, but I would say a 2-page resume really isn't going to be the breaking point for you. So great question. So this next page I show because, you know, if we have some individuals in the room who have more than 5 years experience or even more than 10, realistically, you may be facing some type of a career change at some point in your life. And based on where you are in your career and the type of job you're applying to, there's also strategic ways to order the information in your resume, meaning in what order to put the different sections and then what sections to use. So what I want you to get from this screen is really for a recent grad and someone that's worked basically in the same field for most of their career, you're probably going to use what they call a chronological resume. It starts with your contact information followed by a summary or personal profile. And then your experience would be in reverse chronological order, not a lot of gaps there, right? It's just an easy format. Recruiters are really used to reading this, okay? Someone who may be a career changer or have large gaps in their resume for whatever reason may do more of a functional resume. And this focuses more on the skills and experiences that you have from different jobs rather than the jobs or the job titles themselves. Because if you're changing careers, maybe you were in marketing somewhere else and now you want to be in design. Well, if a recruiter is just looking at the job titles, they may, toss your resume out because it doesn't seem related. So a functional resume, you're going to be pulling the skills up top. You're going to have your accomplishments up top. So they're looking at that first, and then the actual job titles and job duties would be minimized at the bottom, right? Most resumes you see today will actually be a combination resume, and that's really like the best of both formats. You have your contact information and your summary on top. You have your best skills following that, and then you still have your experience and education in your reverse chronological order, but you're highlighting, the most relevant stuff. So it's not an exact science. It's not like you're going to open your resume page and you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to pick this specific format. No, it's just about, okay, where am I at in my career? How relevant were my previous jobs to the one I'm applying to now? And now I'm going to strategically think about the sections to include and where to put them.
And we have a question from Tracy who asks, sure. I have over 25 years experience. Should I go all the way back to the beginning of my career?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, Tracy. The standard protocol for how many years to include is actually 10. So I would say definitely go back 10 years. If you have some really great relevant experience from before that, perhaps still put it on, but you're going to minimize the amount of bullet points. So maybe you have, just one bullet point saying the biggest accomplishment that you did there, just summarizing the role, rather than having like 5 to 7 bullet points that you may have had for the more recent ones. And you said you've been at the same company for 17 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, then if you've been at this, I guess my follow-up question would be, have you been in different roles there, or is it the same role? That one company then is going to take up, it's not going to take up that much space, and you would be able to go further back without having a resume that's crazy long.
And Lauren asked, I feel like the summary section comes and goes with resume trends. How important is it these days?
I think it's really important. I don't see it as often for someone who's like a very new grad. But remember, the resume is your opportunity to craft and tell your story. So if you start with contact information and then you go right into experience, it's like you're not taking the opportunity to summarize what's in your resume and to like tell me what's most important and put it on top. So I think not having a summary is a missed opportunity. I always say to have it. Do resume trends change? Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's still used pretty prevalently. Thanks for that question. All right. Okay, so let's talk about what to include in the resume. So here are some musts for the sections to include. You're absolutely going to have contact information. And if you didn't know, don't put your street address on there. Nowadays everyone is putting their resume everywhere online. You just need to put city, state, zip for that. Sometimes I even see someone will put, greater Boston area and a zip code. So you don't need to put the street address, but of course you should have an email address as well as your cell phone. If you have a portfolio, which many of you will, you can definitely put a portfolio link there, or even like a LinkedIn link as well, right? That is often followed by your job target, right? So if you're applying for a graphic design role, you would put across the top, and I'll show you an example, graphic designer. Right? And for some of you, if you're not in that role yet, whether you're graduating from university or you're switching careers, you can still put graphic designer because that is what you are targeting. It's sort of, again, it's telling the story. It's framing the document so that when the person receives it and looks at it, it's like, okay, I'm about to look at a resume of a graphic designer. So it's part of telling your story. Then again, I recommend following that by a professional summary. Sometimes it's called a professional profile. This should be like 3 to 4 sentences summing up the most important things about you, right? So how many years experience you have in your field, what your best skills and abilities are. If you have like a really like something really big, like an accomplishment that you're known for, you may put that there. Sometimes people even end it with, pursuing, Master of Fine Arts in at whatever university. So again, it's an opportunity to craft your story. It's the most important stuff that you want on top of your resume. I always recommend writing that last, actually, because as you're writing through like the bullet points of your resume, your story is sort of emerging, and it may be easier for you to sort of go back and write that part at the end. Next was your education and work experience. So here's where you want to make a judgment call. Those that are newer in their career, they often put the education before the work experience because that may be the most relevant thing qualification that you have for the job. Or let's say that you're changing careers and your degree is more related to the job, your new degree is more related to the job you're applying to than your work experience. You put your education before work experience. For most professionals, the work experience will go before education if you've had some work in your field. Okay? So those are the things absolutely that you want to have on your resume. And sometimes you'll see them called different things, like sometimes education is called academic experience. Sometimes work experience may be called professional experience. The applicant tracking systems do actually check for certain words. So it may be looking for like typically it's looking for the word like education more than it's looking for academic experience. So you just want to be mindful too of what you call different sections. When I was looking at a bunch of stylized resumes, they had their contact information written in like cute ways, like reach out to me. And that can be a problem if the resume is, if the applicant tracking system is like looking for specifically contact information or a different header. So just be mindful of that. I guess I want to say, like, don't be too creative or cute in what you call these headers. So here are some examples so you can take a look at some of the musts that I just talked about. So Sophia Miller, art director. So that's the job target. Evelyn Morgan, information specialist, job target. So bam, I know what type of resume I'm about to read. Okay. The top of their resumes have the professional profile. That's where my eyes go first. And then it's followed by professional experience with, skills on the side. So I think these were well designed to make me look at the sections that are important. Okay. Next. All right, so let's take a look. What else might you include as a section in your resume based on your unique skills and experiences? Let's put some in the chat. Based on all the things that you've done, what might you put? And I'll give you an example to start. So projects might be one. Right? If you did some stellar projects while you were at university or even in the company that you're in. What are some other ones?
So while people are typing, we have a question in there which says, if you've been at the company but many different roles, how should that be handled? Should it be put together, etc.?
So what you would do, you would typically you write the company once. So like, ABC, company, city, state. Then underneath that, you would put the job title and the, May 2013 to May 2018. So then you put the dates, and then you'd put your bullet points underneath. And then you would follow that with, you don't need to write the company again, you just write the next job title and the dates. And I would say, minimize what has become less important and maximize what is now more important. So if the job that, the couple jobs that you had, maybe, some of the job duties aren't relevant anymore to the career that you have, you can start to minimize those, then they should have less bullet points than what's more important now.
Okay, so we've got some things that are in the chat. We've got awards, speaking engagement, articles, testimonials, hobbies, languages spoken, if you're willing to relocate, volunteering, highlights and milestones, and skills.
Yeah, these are some great ones. All of those could be options based on your unique skill set. I would say, which one did I want? So hobbies is an interesting one. I wouldn't put hobbies or interests on your resume. I just don't think you're going to have room once you put all the other great content that you have on there. Put your hobbies and interests in, your LinkedIn profile, or maybe even if there's like more of an about me section on your, if you have an online portfolio. I think it tends to detract from the more relevant stuff on the resume. But great input, because a lot of people say that. Things like languages spoken, if you're willing to relocate, sure, that definitely can have a place on the resume. I wouldn't say it would be a section, like it's not going to be a header on the resume, but that might be something that you put, like willing to relocate. That might be put, in small wording, like near the contact information. Languages spoken may be under skills or core competencies. So all these are great. So let's take a look at what we put here. Activities, a tagline, volunteer experience, professional associations. So these are all things that you might include on your resume based on you. So if you take a look here, I just added, here's one that has like activities on the bottom. If there was a tagline, it would go under graphic designer. So an example of that might be like, creative professional with proven results in creating, fantastic designs while adding to the company's bottom line. right? That would be a tagline. It appears under the job target. Or maybe, you know, oftentimes people will put, instead of a tagline, they'll put the industries that they're a part of. So it may, you know, financial, healthcare, creative, or maybe they'll put like 3 buzzwords about them: service oriented, you know, artistic, whatever. Just a couple things that you want the reader to really look at because they're a part of your brand.
So we've got 2 questions here.
Mm-hmm.
One is, I'm going to do the second one first. How does a tagline differ from a summary?
Sure, let me show you. Actually, I'll show you in a previous example. Excuse me while I click through this. So actually in this first resume, so here are two with taglines. So look at Joe, applicant, web developer, instructor, that is his job target. Building quality websites and applications with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that's his tagline. Then his summary is this award-winning developer and instructor part.
Okay.
Same thing with Jonathan, under graphic designer, talented design professional with proven ability, but then the professional profile appears later.
Okay. And then Kathy asked, what about if you're not a U.S. citizen, or if you are a U.S. citizen? Should that be somewhere?
That's a great question. I've actually dealt with that before at previous universities. I wouldn't put it, I would not put that on the resume, because remember, it's about getting the interview. So I don't think that needs to appear in like your initial resume. However, it is something in a job application that they ask. So if you're filling out some sort of form and it says, you know, are you a US citizen or not, you do have to be honest and you have to put it there. So that's usually where I see that handled.
Thank you.
No problem. Right. So. Okay, so just some additional tips. You want to utilize, you know, headers and subheaders to segment and introduce information. So those are those like categories that we talked about, like summary, skills, right? Those can be bolder or a little bit bigger, or perhaps a different font to make them stand out and to make it easier for the reader to read. If you are writing in paragraph form, and usually that would take the form of a paragraph in your summary, you know, make sure that there's no big blocks of text, 3 or 4 lines max. Otherwise, you know, a person tends to then just jump to somewhere else on the resume. Okay. If you're a very new professional, you may want to limit your bullet points to like 3 to 5 items in each list. 5 is usually pretty good for a job. If you have, let's say there's like a volunteer experience or a leadership activity from college that you have on your resume, you're not going to have 5 bullet points under that. If anything, maybe you'd have 1 bullet point describing it. If you're experienced and your role is senior, yeah, you're going to have more than 5. I would say not more than 10. Usually you would keep it like 5 to 7, but you're going to have more bullet points under that. And if you do have, let's say you are a senior professional, like our friend on here that said they have, you know, 17 or 25 years in one company. If you have tons of accomplishments and responsibilities under one job, you actually may even categorize those underneath. So let's say like client relations is a category and you have 4 bullet points under that, right? Design is another category and you have 5 bullet points under that. There are ways to divide up the bullet points under a particular job to make it a little bit easier to read. Okay. Make sure your margins are 0.5 inches to 1 inch. 1 inch is pretty much the standard. This is so that you have enough white space, it doesn't look crowded, and also so that it doesn't screw up the applicant tracking system. If you have like a really tiny margin, the system's not gonna be able to read it when you submit it. All right. So a lot of white space. Now, for writing like what I call the modern traditional resume, you're usually going to use a size 11 or 12 point font size. I know that may be different if you're in the creative professions and you're using different fonts. Basically what I'll say here is make a judgment call. You don't want to make your font too small because you're trying to fit everything and then no one can read it. Right? The resume should be 1 to 2 pages. If you are like a C-level executive or it's a more academic resume, then you would have maybe 3 or more pages. and save it in multiple file formats so that you can make sure that the system receiving it, you know, can read it and it's in the format that they want. Okay. Some other things, you want to make sure that your document is well balanced, right? So if you have the opportunity to do a stylized resume, you want to make sure like the 2 columns feel and appear balanced. You want to make sure that it's in proportion, it uses enough white space, as I mentioned. Mind what visual elements that you use. You don't want to be putting pictures on there. If you are using visual elements or colors, make sure that there's a reason behind the ones that you're using, and that it's not too it's not too crazy or anything that makes it hard to read because of a visual element. Consistency is really important. So if you're going to use multiple fonts in a resume, do it wisely, right? So maybe the headers are a particular font, but the text underneath is all a different font. You want to make sure it looks consistent, looks like a nice, clean piece of work that goes together. And then the last part, which I actually think is one of the most important things that I tell people, is the placement. So remember when I said this is ultimately a marketing document, you are telling a story. So you have the ability to place the sections and information that are most important to your story where the recruiter or human viewing it is going to see them, right? So I always say craft a top third of your resume that is really stellar and inspires the reader to read past 6 seconds. So if I look at a resume and I'm a recruiter, I should barely have to move my eyes for that 6 seconds to see if you're qualified. I see your tagline and your job target. I'll probably read a teeny bit of your summary, and then I'm going to look at your skills. That's my 6 seconds, barely moving my eyes. So if you have sold me like, okay, this person's probably qualified, only then will I read further. So make sure that you are using the real estate wisely. Important stuff's on top, organize it well, make it, easy to read and easy on the eyes.
So we have a question from Caitlin.
Sure.
I've been working with integrating the CAR method in my resume, but it definitely makes keeping things shorter much harder. Any ideas how to avoid that? And for those who don't know, can you say what the CAR method is?
Sure. That is it is like the contributions, actions, results. It's a way, we're actually going to talk about a way to write bullet points for that. It definitely can make your resume sentences a little bit longer because you're putting numbers, percents, you're quantifying, you're qualifying statements. I would say just really go through an iterative process. Write it, rewrite it, edit it down. Make sure that bullet point is really important to telling your story. Again, your resume may be longer. I'm not sure how long you're talking about, but maybe it's 2 pages. If you are telling what's important, you want to leave that bullet point in. If your resume is like going well over, it's going over 2 pages, then yeah, you're going to need to cut back and be like, okay, is this bullet point actually important now? Take a look at your prior jobs, right? Like, maybe I thought this was important at one time, but maybe I have another job duty at my more recent job that tells this story or this accomplishment, and edit it out. Remember, you don't have to put every single thing on your resume. It really should be like a glimpse of you and just enough to get the interview.
So we have something from Lauren who says, how important is it to list clients as part of your work experience? I find it's one thing that always gets asked about when I'm interviewing because it's on my resume, but is this standard?
I would say it really varies. If in the job description, they are saying like you need to have worked with a certain caliber, level, or type of clients, then I absolutely would put it in the resume. Even if they don't ask, if the clients you work with are going to be like, wow, that's going to get me the interview, absolutely put it in. I would say there's no hard, fast answer on that. If you think that it's going to get you the interview, put it in. If you don't think it's quite as important, leave it out.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I don't think it's standard. It's just, it's really is a judgment call. All
You've
right.
got someone like me who's been in business 35 years. I don't put past companies, but I do list clients on mine.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. And if anyone else in the group wants to sort of put their input on that, feel free, you know, if something has worked for you, we want to hear about it. Okay. So the content is my favorite part. You could have a well-designed resume, but the content needs to be strong in order to make it past an ATS software or a recruiter or hiring professional. And often I find that, you know, clients I work with, they're really, really great at writing job duties, but they don't really show how well they did that job duty and why that job duty or responsibility actually matters to their department, their company, their client, or the community that they serve. So a great bullet point is going to start with a really strong descriptive action word, right? I put just a couple up here. If you go into Google and you type in action verbs for resumes, there are like hundreds of sites that will pop up. I recommend save a couple. And so when you're writing your resume, just reference these, you know, never start a sentence with like responsibilities included. That's so boring. You really want to use something that's graphic, that's, you know, really hits them with like, oh, wow, that's what this person did, right? You also want to quantify and qualify your statements, right? So you can quantify your statements by adding numbers, dollars, and percentages. This is really to show more about like the scope of your work, right? So you can say, I planned an event. Great, but you know, maybe you plan 3 to 4 events per year, and therefore, you know, 500 plus people. And you work with a budget of over 100K each time. Now I'm like, oh, okay, she doesn't just plan events, like she plans, like she, you know, is planning some big events with big budgets and a lot of people, right? So here are some other examples for that. You know, you review 40 to 50 articles, you saved your company an estimate of 15,000 per year, or you improved client retention 25%. You know, you always want to be thinking of how can I really demonstrate the value of my work? Now, here's where a lot of people say, but I don't always know the numbers, right? And that's okay. If you do know a number, put it in. But you can also qualify your statements by, you know, let's say like you improved customer satisfaction by, you know, redesigning something, whatever. That's a way to say it, to kind of qualify the statement and to show why it's important, even though you don't have the number. Right? So as much as you can, you always want to have a statement that is well quantified and well qualified. Right? So really important, you also want to use accomplishment-based statements instead of job duties. So accomplishment-based statements, that's what we're getting at with quantifying and qualifying. They are written proof of the results, achievements, and successes from your past experiences. Okay? So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's an example. So you can say, I ran social media accounts using Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Great, that's what you did, but I want to know how well you did it, right? And why that matters to the company. So instead, with a stronger verb and with some quantifying numbers, implemented marketing and promotion tactics that led to 34% growth in social media shares and a 25% increase in web traffic. Again, if you absolutely don't have numbers, it can just say, you know, that led to growth in social media shares and an increase in website traffic, right? I see a lot of like interns do that because they're like, I already left the company. I don't know, I can't get that data. So that's a way to qualify it, right? So now, if you're struggling, here are some questions to think about when you're writing from scratch, right? So think about, you know, what did I create or produce in this role? Let's say you made a style guide, right? And maybe you were the first person to ever create a style guide for that company. That's an accomplishment in itself. And then, you know, what was the purpose of the style guide? Why did you have to create it? And what, you know, what result did it bring? So maybe by having everyone have like consistent guidelines, it saved people time and energy when they were, you know, selecting images, right? What problems were you solving? Did you save the company money or time? Did you do something, like I mentioned, that had never been done before? Did you recommend a new way to do something? Maybe you improved something. Excuse me. Did you do something that was above and beyond your normal job duties? Right? Did you win any awards? Maybe you didn't win an award, but you consistently, met your goals and, got good reviews from your boss, or maybe your boss just said like, wow, that, you did that in a really excellent way, right? So all of those things are questions to ask yourself when you're trying to write these these accomplishment-based statements. And after this, if you're still struggling, we actually have a formula, and this is what our friend was kind of alluding to on the call. CAR is one way to say it. I use contributions plus results plus indicators equals your accomplishment-based statement. And I use the word contributions instead of the word like action for a reason. Because when I am working with someone, oftentimes they say like, I don't know, like, yeah, my company had this big event, but like I was only minimally involved, or I only did this. And so I'm like, well, hold up, like your role in this is more important than you think. You didn't have to plan or manage the entire process, or like, be responsible for the entire final product, but you definitely made a contribution. So let's focus on what is that contribution. And let's take a look at what this looks like in practice. So let's say their contribution was they participated in a strategy meeting, and this was actually a real example from someone in my department, participated in a strategy meeting regarding the redesign of alumni digital communications pieces. And their role in that was to create and submit mock-ups and drafts. So maybe they didn't they weren't responsible for the final draft, right? Maybe they weren't the one who picked it, but their contribution was creating and submitting that. And so as a result, new logos were created, an email header, and a format for a newsletter. Okay, so the whole group may have come up with that, but the person still contributed to that result being achieved, right? And so then at the end, so how do you know that you were successful? What does success look like when you create a new logo, email header, or format? Well, a lot of times it's how many people open it, right? So the open and click rates increased after the redesign, right? So when I was helping this person write this, they kind of went from like, I did nothing for this project to, oh, wow, like I didn't realize that I contributed to such like an important project in our department. Right? So let's actually go through a process for this, and I'll just look in the chat real quick before we start that.
Yeah, we have one thing from Melissa who said, I read resumes and interview people in my current role, and I agree the numbers just give me an idea of the impact you might have had. I'm not calling your past company to check that one fact, and I will have questions prepared to see if you know what's up.
Yeah, awesome, thanks. Yeah, so anything you put in your resume, should be true, and you better be able to speak to it and back that up. Right? So let's go through some steps. So we're going to take what that person wrote in that little grid from a decent bullet point to a really, really strong one. All right. So the first thing to do is you basically just string those three phrases together, right? Participated in strategy meetings, alumni newsletter, increased mail read and read through rates. I basically just added and now I have, instead of three phrases, I have a sentence. Okay, that's easy, right? Step two, I want to use a stronger verb. So I don't just want to say I participated in strategy meetings. I really want to focus more on my role, which was helping to design the new logo, email header, and alumni newsletter, because my contributions led to that design, right? Now, an alternate way to write it, instead of starting with like the action, like you design the new logo, you can actually, you can start with the result. So increased the read and click-through rates because of the design, right? So it's just two different ways to write it. Choosing your verb wisely, like it will help the reader focus on, what's most important and what you want to tell them. So next is to quantify and qualify that statement as much as possible. So we have the increased email read and click-through rates. And then they added how much it was increased and what the time span was. And then also how many people those emails are sent to. So is this something that is sent to like a population of 5 people? No, it's sent to 50,000 people. So now it's like, oh, okay. Like, so this maybe was a big thing. Now I can see a little bit more about the scope of what you did. Okay. And then next is really taking it to the next level, showing a person why it matters, right? So improved the effectiveness of university to alumni electronic communications by participating in the strategic redesign and implementation of digital assets. And then we have the rest of the numbers and such that we quantify, right? So we took it from like, okay, like, yeah, I did this, I helped edit some stuff, to really like, no, this is why this project was important, and I was a part of a really important project. Now, if you get to step 4 and it doesn't ring true to you, like if you think it's overselling it, okay, maybe take a step back and maybe you go back to step 3, right? We want this to ring true and to feel authentic. But really, if you use these 4 steps, you can take it from a boring statement to really like, wow, this is the purpose of this role in this project. So next we're gonna do an activity. So what we wanna do is our lovely moderators are going to break you into groups, and you're going to get a chance to revamp your content. So for the essence of time, I will let the moderators go over it in a little bit more detail, but basically get your resume ready. You're going to pick one bullet point under one experience and practice rewriting it with the method that we described. And I believe the links for the handout was shared, and you're going to have some help with your moderator doing that.
So I put the link for the handout again in the chat. It did also come in your email, so you might already have it. It's the same thing that I just placed there.
Yeah. And please, we have a lot of great experience and thoughts and feedback from this group. After you've done doing your individual work, share with your group, give some good feedback on what you think and how maybe it can be improved.
We're going to go